All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2020 semester at Centennial, and what a interesting semester it's been. Very interesting indeed. I'm just going to start sharing my screen with you guys. Stop sharing. There we go. So yeah, so now at this point I'm recording both on YouTube as well as sharing with you guys on virtual classroom. Yeah, it's been a crazy semester, and I've just finished talking to the class about changes, which I will post in terms of announcements up on eCentennial later today, which will be just those two things. Assignment 2 is the due date's been moved off. You get an extra week for both things. Your beta release, which is due today, is due next week, and assignment 2 is due the week after. All right, so you have a couple of things like that. And the final presentation, we have to work it out how we're going to do that. Because of this whole idea of screen sharing. I don't know how that's going to work. Okay. So let's continue with the lesson from this week. So what we want to do this week is review what we did last time. So when we got together last time, we actually were in week 8. You guys missed week 9. I did week 9 with the other group, but you guys missed it. So I'm going to bring up week 8. I'm going to copy that one and then paste it here and call it 10C. And then I'm going to put this up on GitHub just like we normally do. So you have an option. So there is 8C copy. We're going to make this 10C. 10C. There it is. And so just before you start with this, I'm just going to start off VS Code, which you guys should be able to see. And guys, you can always come up. I can hear you. So if you come up, remember that you'll be recorded, but at least I can hear you, and then I can stop if you need something. I'll also check periodically on your chat, and I'll see if you guys are okay, and then we can go from there. So this is week 8. We need to rename this thing inside of our package.json. So right now it says 8C. We want to make this so this is 10C. That's today. Kind of missed week 9. And again, the same thing goes with my index.html. Just for completeness, we're going to just say week 10 or lesson 10 here. And then so we made the changes. And what I also want to do is control backtick. I want to get rid of the remote, just like normal. So git remote, remove origin. So remote's gone. And let's make a new Git repository. So again, I'm going to go up to GitHub and go to Centennial College and add in a new repository. So it's COMP397 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's lesson 10C, right? We'll make it public, and we'll grab these last 2 lines of code, which I've been kind of doing the whole time with you guys, and just right click and paste, and then enter, and that should push everything up that we have so far. All right, and what I'm also going to do is update the changes because I've updated my project. So I'm going to go here and click this little button which stages everything, and I'll say updated project settings. There we go. And then click this little checkbox and push it up to GitHub. So that your GitHub should be up to date. I will post the GitHub link as well as the video link on YouTube for you guys to see if you want to watch it later on. Okay, so it'll be recorded like normal. All right, let's run this thing and see what it does. So again, Control-Shift-B in order for me to watch what's happening, all the changes. So that's kind of launching this again. And then what I want to do is in another terminal window, I'm just going to use Light Server in order for me to kick this off, and then we can see what it looks like. So this is what we have from last week, last time we got together, right? Which was 14 days ago, actually. If I click start, you can see that I got my plane, I got sounds, right? It makes sounds already, right? And that's all I have. So the sounds are working. But now what we need to do is we need to do a couple things. First of all, this shouldn't be called the game. Let's change this. So our start scene, let's do some cosmetic changes. and we'll go into scripts. I'm going to go into scenes, start, and in my start scene you can see that it is originally called the game. I want to make this, I want to call this male pilot. There we go, there's male pilot, right? And this is using a start button. And what I'm going to be doing here with this one is, let's just test to see how that looks. So you can see now it says male pilot instead of the game. If I click start, you can still see that's working, right? And I got people entering the room trying to get board games. This is interesting. All right, there we go. All right, and come on, guys. This is what happens when you remember I was talking about distractions at home. There it is, distractions at home. All right, so that's male pilot. And what I want to do now is I want to kind of build some way of collecting my score every time I hit an island or I run over a cloud, as an example. I want to be able to detect that from happening. So I want to see that that's going on. I know. From what I'm seeing, it's a bit choppy. What you're seeing is a bit more choppier than what I'm seeing, and I fully expect that because the frame rate will be fairly low. Okay. Okay. So how can we do this? So we modified the start screen, and again, I could do a commit here. I could do small little commits when you're working. So I can go up here to changes. I can stage all my changes, nice and easy, and then I can say something like updated. Welcome message, right? So I've done this, and I can push this to GitHub. You can do little changes like this, or you can do bigger changes. As long as I see that you're working with GitHub, this is where you're going to get full marks for both your assignment and for your project documents. Okay, that's what you're doing. Okay, so I want to think about ways of showing my score. One thing we've done so far is I've got my my score happening. I can do a score, but the way I'm doing it right now is I'm using the managers. Under collision manager, you can see what I'm doing, right? My collision manager is detecting me colliding, right? That's what's happening, and I'm using the squared radius check. That's what we did last time, squared radius check. Notice I also have this AABB style check. I'm not really using my AABB style collision detection. I'm only using my squared radius check. Okay. So what square radius check does, and we talked about this last time, I created a little volume for my, for my yay sound and my thunder sound. When we collide with the island, we play the yay sound. We created this thing, which is an abstract sound instance, and it did the same thing with the thunder sound. Okay. What's important for us to do is in my objects plane. So if I go to my plane.ts, on the top here, you notice that when I instantiate my plane, I create an engine sound. And this engine sound right now is local. It's here. But my challenge is going to be that this engine sound that I create is something that's going to last past my scene. And the reason for this is because the way sound works in JavaScript. Okay, sound in JavaScript works a lot different than it does, let's say, in C++ or something else. My sound object is not limited to living just in this scene, because my scenes are just constructs. Like, we're just making them so that they're layers on top of the canvas. What's actually happening is whenever I want to make sound happen in JavaScript, I'm attaching the sound to the document, the actual HTML document, which means that my engine sound is going to last from one scene to the other scene unless I turn it off. But right now I don't have a way of turning it off because this engine sound variable is local to my start function, right? So I have to make an engine sound that is part of, it's a property that I can access from my plane. Okay, let me talk about this. So I'm going to make a new property. I'm going to type in the word prop. Prop gives me this. It allows me to make a brand new property. We're going to call this engine sound. The type is create.js.abstract sound instance, like we saw before. That's what that type is. Okay. But remember what this is. When I create this sound instance, it's definitely there's a private part to it, and the engine sound itself is something that I want to have access outside of my plane, so I can turn it off, like I talked about, right? I want to turn off my engine sound. Well, here's the thing. Am I ever going to set a new engine sound? Chances are not. I'm just going to get a reference. That's what this thing does. Because engine sound is an object, that's what it is. I'm not really getting a value. It's not a value. I'm not returning a value type here. I'm returning a reference type. A reference type is simply a pointer. So I never really need to set my engine. I just need to get my engine. So I only need that part. I don't need this part. So I can remove the getter altogether. Right? So I can take this away, cut it, and I can put it in my public properties. And this is the first public property I have for my plane, right? Where I can kind of have access to the engine sound, all right? If I scroll down now, what I need to do is make some changes to start. Instead of the engine sound being like this, let engine sound is equal to this. Instead, what I want is to use this dot. And I want to say that the engine sound, this dot underscore engine sound is equal to a new engine. Right? Like this. And what this does is it exposes the engine sound itself, so I can turn it off and on later on. I'm going to need to do this, and this is why you have to modify this part of your start in order for us to do that. Okay? Questions around this engine sound? Yeah, I know, it's all kinds of music going on in the background. No questions. Okay, great. All right, so that's this. That's the sound part. So when we start off. Now, what I want to do, right, for this one is I want to be able to show I want to show a label. So when I collide, let me just run this again. So again, if I go back to this and I collide, right? It's kind of incomplete. What I really want to show here is when I collide, I have a label on the top of my screen, on the top left and top right, that says my lives and my score. Now there's a couple ways to do this. One way is to create a static class, right, and kind of do something similar to our manager. But the problem with the static class is it doesn't allow for properties, and I have to create a lot of other constructs along with it for me to do this. I could also use something called a singleton. I'm not ready to discuss the singleton yet for JavaScript, so let's just make it a simple class for now. So again, I'm going to make a new file, and we're going to call this the scoreboard.ts file. That's what it is. So it's like a scoreboard manager. That's what it is, scoreboard manager. And again, I'm going to put it inside module managers, because it's the same module. And I'm going to export this new class called scoreboard. This is something you've seen before. And again, a little bit of review for you if you're watching this on YouTube. So we need a couple things. We need some private instance members. We also need some public properties. Wow. As well as a constructor, and then there's some private methods as well as public methods. This is just the standard stuff that we start off, and whenever we make a class, we have this stuff happen. Okay, so let's talk about private instance members. So what private instance members do we need? Well, we definitely need lives and score. So let's make those properties. So I'll say prop, and again, the first one is going to be lives. It's going to be a number, okay? And I definitely want to take this one and just put it a little bit on the top. So I have some repositioning some stuff here, okay? So here's lives. I definitely need a getter and a setter because I want to be able to set lives and get lives. That's the number of lives that I have, okay? Lives. But I definitely want these to be capitals. I want anything that I access from my scoreboard, I want it to be caps, indicating that it's public. Okay, underscore indicates it's private for now. Let's take these two things. These are two properties, and move it inside the properties area right here. Okay, just organizational wise. Next, let's do the same thing for score. Prop. So score. Again, I'm just tabbing to get this happening. Okay, it's built into VS Code. I'm not doing anything special. And then I can type in number. So it's returning a number type. Just like before, I'm just going to move this up. And I'm just going to rename this to capital S for score. And I'm just going to realign the curly braces so that they're underneath each other. I think this is a better way of formatting. And this way, I have a chance to wipe away the signature and or comment it out and add something else if I really want to. It makes it easier for me to do that. I'm going to cut these out and put them over here. So lives and score. I also need the labels. So one thing is the actual data members. These are data members. This is where the lives and score numbers are going to be held. But I also need labels for these things to show, to actually show them live on the screen. So again, I'm going to say private or prop. This time I'm going to call these the lives label. Lives label. This is going to be of type objects.label, our own custom object, right? The label object. Again, I'm going to cut this out and put it here. And we're going to have the discussion again. We're going to say, hey, do I really need a setter here? Am I ever going to make a new label that I want to set this label to? I'm pointing right now to my own label object, but am I ever going to need to do this again? And the answer is no. So I don't need a setter. I only need a getter for this one. Again, for the getter, I'm going to make it so it's caps, just so we adhere to the convention we're using. I'm going to put this getter down in here. Okay, so lives label. Let's do the same thing with score label. Prop. Oops. So score label again is of type objects.label. That's what we're adding in there. Again, what I want to do is I want to move this up. I'm using the Alt key for me to do that. And then this one, I don't need the setter, but I do need the getter. Right, oops, undo. I do need the getter. And I'm going to take this getter, and again, I'm going to use the Alt key to move it down. Now you can do that with the Alt key, where you can move it down wherever you want to. That's another way of doing it. And you can see that the score label and the score label is below the lives label now, right, which is kind of nice. Okay, so I can get rid of all that space. And so there you have it. So now I have a pretty good start on what my scoreboard looks like, and I got some properties and some private instance members. Starting to get to it. Okay, next, constructor. What is that going to look like? Well, I want to do some initialization, and I'm going to create an initialize method because I don't want my constructor to be polluted. So I'm going to say it's going to be a private instance member called initialize, and it's going to return void. And this method is going to be called by the constructor. Now, do I have to do this? No, I don't. I do this because I want to separate stuff. If I wanted to add more things in the constructor, then I only call this one function. You can see what's happening. So I'm initializing or starting. Normally this would be called start, but here I'm not adhering to my game object superclass. I'm not inheriting from that. Scoreboard is its own thing. It's not inheriting from another class. So I'm creating a new structure. So what initialize is going to do is a couple things. I want to instantiate my labels. So I'm going to say this dot underscore lives label. Well, that's equal to a new objects.label. Right, we still have to do this. And then I need to pass in some information for my objects.label. One of the things I want to pass in is what the label looks like. By default, lives are going to look like this. Let's say 99 lives as an example. And then some kind of font size. I figure that 20 pixels looks like it's right for this one. And we're going to use Consolus for now, but we're going to do a custom font later on. Not today. And the font color is FFFF00. This is the yellow color we've been using so far. And then my X and Y coordinates. So for my lives label, the way I picture it, it's going to be on the top left corner of the screen. So it's going to be like 20 pixels from the left and then 20 pixels down, 20 by 20, right? So that's where it's going to start off, right? And do I want to center this? No, I don't. False. I don't want it to be centered, so I'm going to leave it blank because the default is not centered. Okay, so that's my lives label. And then we want to put together my score label. Okay, so my score label is going to have score. And maybe it's going to have more spaces, 9999, let's say. 20 pixels, console us. And this time on the x-axis, we're going to go to something like 490, so towards the right side of the screen. And that's where it's going to be initialized. Okay, but what we need to initialize lives instead of 99 and 9999. We need to initialize this to a value. And the other thing I want to do with this is when I move from one level to another, I want to keep track of my score. Like, for example, let's say I have 5 levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And I have a score from level 1. I transition to level 2. How do I pass data from level 1 to level 2? I need to do that somehow. One of the ways you can do that is using your config file. We've got a config file, and you can do that in the global area here, where I can create a few variables. One, public static, thing called a variable called lives, which is a number, and we can set the default lives to 5, let's say, and also public static score, which we set to 0 initially. All right, so this is where it comes from. I also want to make a reference to my scoreboard, right? So I want to say public static scoreboard, because I want to have sometimes access to this in other levels, which is of type managers.scoreboard. That's going to be the new thing. I don't have that reference yet. I'm going to make this reference later on, but I want these 3 things in there for now. Okay? Are you with me so far? Hopefully you are. I'm just going to check to see my chat, see that you guys are still good. Yes. Okay, thank you. Let's continue. So yeah, so this is my scoreboard. So my scoreboard then, if I create my objects label, I want to set the text of my objects label later on. I want to set my lives and my score to something else. I want to do something like this. This dot lives, capital L, is equal to config.game.lives, right? I want to do that because I want to get the default. What if I want to change it later on? What if I decide everyone starts with only 3 lives? I don't want to go every place. I just want to go to one place, the config. Okay, and what about score, right? So here's my score. So this dot score capital S, right? That's equal to config.game.score, right? Well, cool. This is great for setting up my lives and my score, but it's not going to change my label. Or can I do it? Well, I know I'm going to have these setters, right? I have a live setter and a score setter, right? Why don't I just do it here? And this is a great place to do it. And some people have always said, why do I need setters and getters? Why do I need that? I mean, if it's public anyway, you're public access, but this is why you need getters and setters. It's a method that you can use anywhere you want. Or you can put other things in there. So one of the things I can do is I can update my config. I can say that config.game.lives, well, that equals to this dot underscore lives. Whenever I update lives, I update the game as well. Now this is going to be a circular reference in the first time I do this, but it doesn't mean anything. It just means that, well, this is equal to itself. So that's going to be okay. And then after that, I want to update the label itself. I want to say this dot lives label, right? And I want to set text. I want to set my text of my live label. And I'm doing this, actually, in this case, all I have to do is just text. I don't have to do my set text. That's equal to what it will look like. So lives, right? Plus the value, this dot underscore lives. So that's going to actually update the lives label automatically. I want to do the same thing for score. So I want to say, well, when I update score, I want to change my config.game.score. So to whatever this new score is, right? So score. And I also want to update the score label, right? Here's my score label. And I should probably revamp this. I didn't change this to capitals. Let's do that now. So I will just change the name. So rename symbol to score label. Make sure that that's done properly, guys, or else you'll have some inconsistencies here, and I don't agree with that. So score label again dot text. Well, that's equal to score. It'll say score, and then plus whatever the score is going to be, which is this dot underscore score. Okay. So you see here, anytime I update lives or score, then the label will automatically be updated as well. And this is a great way of doing it without me having an update pass. I don't have to do an update. This does it for me. Whenever I do something, I can inject it with my setters. That'll do everything I need to do. Okay? So when I do this, what I'm actually doing is I'm using the setter for lives and score and for my labels. That's what I'm doing automatically when I do this. And that's all I need to do right now, guys. Like, that's as simple as it can be for my scoreboard class. Okay, but remember, we can't add the scoreboard class like this. We need to add it first into my index.html. So going back to my index.html, I need to make a new manager over here. So I'm going to say script source and then /scripts. Oh wow, there's an error. /managers /scoreboard, right? And look at this. Somehow we forgot to put this in here. That's been there for the whole time. I'm not sure how that would ever work. That should not work. It should be this. Wow, so that collision may have not worked for you somehow. But that was an incorrect, that was a typo that I had there from last time. Okay, cool. So collision and scoreboard, that's what's going on here. And I've added my scoreboard now so I can use it. Let's try and use it now inside of my scene. So again, first part, we make the scoreboard. Let's put it up on GitHub first. We can say, just if you're having trouble following along, I can put this up. So I'm going to sage everything. I'm going to say added scoreboard class, right? And then I'll push this. I hear Thunderdome in the background. I don't know, someone's playing Thunderdome in my house. Old song. All right, so yeah, so that's been pushed. Excellent, right? And now what I want to do is I want to incorporate that in my scene. So again, I'm going to go to my play scene now. Here's my play scene. And just like I have ocean, plain, island, and clouds, I'm going to make a new scoreboard. So I'm going to say that I want a new scoreboard, which is of type managers.scoreboard. Okay, so I'm actually going to make an object here. Managers scoreboard. In my start, I'm going to instantiate it, just like normal. So I'm going to say this dot underscore scoreboard is equal to a new managers dot scoreboard. That's what this does. It creates a new scoreboard. Yay! And then no update. I don't have to update my scoreboard. But here in my main, I want to add it after everything else. And why? Because then my score can be on top of everything, layered on top, just like we talked about the painter's algorithm. So this dot add child, and they can say this dot underscore scoreboard dot, for example, the lives label, right, which is what I want to add on the left side, and this dot add child, this dot underscore scoreboard dot the score label, right, which is going to be added on the other side. Okay, so lives label on this side, score label on the other side. This should do it for us, and then that'll make it happen. But it'll just show 5 and 0. Let's do that first. Let's see how that works. So again, I'm going to go to here. And you can see now that I got 5 and 0, right? But it doesn't seem to update, right? But of course it wouldn't update because we haven't done anything to update this thing yet. And so the way to make this update is to actually do it inside of your collision manager. So if you go to collision manager, so there's collision.ts, there it is. And here we make the yay sound, and we have this sound here. What I would like to do is access that scoreboard and then update the lives and here and the score here. But we need to enable this. So when we instantiate the scoreboard inside of our start here, then we have to make a reference to it on the global config file. So we can say that, okay, config.game.scoreboard is equal to this dot scoreboard. So what we're doing is we're making a reference. We're passing a reference from this scoreboard to the global configuration. So that when we do this, then what I'm actually doing is I'm updating this scoreboard on the global config. Okay? So once I've done that, then if I go back to my collision manager, I can literally put it in here. So yes, I make a yay sound, but I also want to update my score. So I want to say that config.game.scoreboard dot scoreboard, there we go, dot and I can do lives if I want to or whatever. Or if I just update lives, I can do that. But what I want to do is I want to modify my scoreboard dot score, right? My scoreboard score. So again, I'm looking at my scoreboard object, whatever that's pointing to. I'm running over an island, so I want to add score to myself, right? That's what I want. And I'm going to say that that's plus equals to 100. Okay. By the way, notice we also had an enum for the game object type. We created that last week, which is slightly different than what I talked about today. I used the name of the object today in the first section. In this section, we're using an enum, which is actually a better way of doing it. Okay, cool. So we have our score. It's going to increase every time we run over an island by 100 points. Okay, what about our lives? When we run over a cloud, though, we want to say that my scoreboard dot lives is minus equal to 1. You can also use minus minus here, the decrement operator to do that, but this is just fine as well. So again, increase the score by 100, decrease lives by 1. Let's see if this works. So again, going back to this, let's start. So you can see my lives go down. Oh, wait, what happened to my score? Didn't go up. What's happening? How come my score is not going up? That's terrible, right? Well, my lives are going down. So one part is working, but the other part is not. Okay, well, what happened? So lives going down, score doesn't seem to increment the scoreboard. Scoreboard.score. So let's see what happened here. Let's do some tracing. Yeah, it worked perfectly this morning, but hey, we might have missed something. So let's go back to my scoreboard.ts and let's take a look at what we did. So lives, okay, so lives are open. Here's score, and we say the score is equal to this score, whatever the score is, and we say the score label.text is equal to this new score. Well, that should totally work, right? I mean, we update the score, capital S, then that should totally work. Well, what's happening? Why is this not happening? Lives and score? That is odd. Why it's not working. No. So yeah, let's check this out and see why it's not doing it. We can totally, what we can do is we can totally trace this, but let's see what's happening here. So lives, which is a getter, and if I go to definition for this, you should be able to go to definition. You can see that lives is actually a setter, and it does exactly what I said it was supposed to do. So I set a number, lives, and this totally works, right? Well, what about score? So scoreboard.score, go to definition. You can see again, score, here it is. Here's our getter, right? And here's our setter. So we're saying, hey, set the score to whatever the new score is going to be. So here's our new score, this dot underscore score. And we're saying score label.text is going to show whatever we want it to show, which is this dot underscore score. Same exact thing. So why isn't it working? Well, we're going to see in a second. So let's save everything, make sure it's saved. Sometimes it's a transpile thing. And one thing to check also is, what does this look like on the collision.js? So it looks like collision.js looks okay. Looks okay that on that side. And let's also look at the manager. So managers, scoreboard.ts. Oh, I know what we did. We did something different for your version than we did from the other version. Haha. Yes, yes, yes. Under the, this is so interesting. That's what happens when you lose a week. In the play scene, right? Take a look at what we're doing here. We're doing two different types of collision detection. This one is squared radius check between the cloud and the plane, but we're doing an ABB check between the plane and the island. That's why it's not working, because we've only configured one but not the other one, right? So, and now we're seeing some duplication, and once we start seeing duplication, we can sit there and say, is there a way to simplify this type of check, right? Because this is what's happening, right? We're duplicating. It's the exact same thing over and over again. And actually, we're passing an object to of type in here, right? Once we know it's not colliding, and we're doing the exact same thing over here. Wouldn't it be nice if we had some kind of thing to do it once? So for now, we're not going to do that. We're just going to copy paste, but would be nice. And that's why it's causing a problem. It's actually working exactly like we said it's supposed to work, but that doesn't mean that it's right. So Copy this 2 pieces. So now we can see the AABB style collision detection also is updated with this new stuff. All right, now it should work. Let's go check it out. So again, start. You can see I get score and lives, right? And we're good to go. Except that, well, my lives are going negative, right? And I don't want my lives to go negative at all. I want my lives, when my lives go negative, I want to switch over to the end scene. That's what I want to do. By the way, guys, we're sitting about 2:30. I'm going to go for another half an hour max, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll continue for the last part. All right, so how do we do that? So again, we want to check to see when everything happens. So now, right now, we do have our lives, and our scoreboard is working. So I'll put this up on GitHub. You can see I'm doing many commits today. So there it is. I'm going to say, so we added the scoreboard this time, but now added scoreboard to play scene. That's what we kind of did, right? And then push. So that now you should have everything that I have on the scoreboard. Any questions so far? Are you guys good? Just going to check the chat, make sure you guys are good. I see that there's an extra person that's joined. That's a good thing. Welcome. I know it's a little bit asynchronous, where people join when they want to join, but thank you for coming. All right, so yeah, so we've got this part done, and what I want to do now is I want to make it so that when my score drops below a certain number, then my life drops below a certain number, then I move from one thing to the other. But I want to deal with this problem right here, because I have 2 methods: squared radius check, which is a collision method, and AABB check, which is another type of collision method, and they're the exact same in here, right? In fact, all I need to do is this switch case. I want to pull this out as a method. Notice it says return true, right? But return true is for this whole thing. Object 2 is colliding. That's true as well. This is all the stuff that I want to make happen. But this part right here, this is identical every single time. And I want to pull this out. And is there a way of refactoring this? So if I click refactor, it says extract to method in class collision. Extract to function in namespace managers. Could do that, right? So the whole manager's namespace. Extract to function in global scope. So these are the 3 options it gives me. I want to make it here. Extract to method in class collision. So I want to do that. Here's the method. It's actually really quite smart. We can name the method whatever we want. For example, this is going to be, check object, right? So again, I'm colliding. Object 2 is colliding. Okay. Then what happens with object 2? So what is the action? What is the result? Like a collision response. So we're going to call this collision response, and we're going to make it private, because this is not something we have to share. Collision response is what I want to call that. So we're going to go to the collision response, and we're going to pass in object 2, right? That's going to do what it's supposed to do. Collision response. Collision response is just literally this. It's just going to basically, it's a private static method, right? That's only going to be for us to use. It's perfect. It did exactly what I wanted to do. Private static method, collision response. And now, if I just have to code it once, so I can copy this, and I can go up to this part right here, and just remove all this, and just use this. So I've just refactored a little bit just to make it so it's more reasonable. So now you can see my squared radius check and my AABB check is doing the exact same thing. And I'm using this collision response, a private static helper method. That's what this is. So this is, let's document it. Helper method to assist with collision response. That's what it does. So when I collide, what happens? Well, I make a sound. and I update my scoreboard and my lives, right? So I only have to worry about this one time. That's what I want to do, because otherwise we're going to have to do this copy paste stuff over and over again, which is really inefficient. So I'm going to go here and modify this in a second. So again, GitHub, add this to the staging area and say updated collision manager with collision response. Collision response, right? And then push. So what this does is it just tells you that I've created this little function to help us. Okay, so this is all I care about now. I don't care how I got here. All I care about is that I'm here, right? And what this means is, well, okay, so what happens when my lives drop below 1? Well, if my lives drop below 1, I want to move, I want to shift from this scene to another scene. That's what I want to do, okay? So how did I do this last time? So if you look at my start scene, if I go to scenes, and if I go to start, we have an example of this. Here's my start scene. And on the bottom, when I click a button, my start button, it says, hey, change my config game scene to this play scene. Well, now I want to do this, but I want to go to the end scene instead. So I'm going to copy this part, go to collision.ts, and I'm going to say that, okay, cool. Well, let's subtract a life. And if my config.game.lives, if my lives become, are less than 1, right, then I want to change my scene to the end scene. That's what I want to do. So check if lives falls less than 1, and then switch to end scene. That's what this does. Okay. So that check is being done in the collision response helper method in the collision manager. So checks. Hey, I lost a life, now move to end. Okay, let's check this and see if it works. So, make some score, and then die, end scene. Hey, wait a minute. It's still playing my engine. It's playing my engine because I never stopped it from playing my engine. Remember I told you? It's not going to stop playing the engine ever. And if I go back, it's going to play it again. Oh man, look what happened. Look. It's going to keep on making you engine sounds forever. I'm trapped in an endless loop. No, I'm not. I can fix this. But it takes a little bit of work. So this is right. I want to do this, but I want to turn off the engine. And I want to do that when I shift my scene. But shifting scenes happens in my game.ts. Game.ts down in here, right? If I scroll down, you can see that I do this. I say, well, when depending on the scene, I move from one scene to the other. But up here, I'm doing a little bit of cleanup. But this cleanup should be different for every scene. Maybe sometimes I want to remove all children. Maybe sometimes I want to remove all children and turn off my plane sound or something else. So this is not sufficient. I shouldn't be doing this here. I should be calling the scenes cleanup method, which doesn't exist. Let's modify the scene superclass so it does. So I'm going to go back to the scene superclass in my objects. Let's go to my scene superclass. This is the scene superclass here. Right? Here it is. And I want to add in a new abstract method. So public abstract. We're going to call this method clean, which returns void. And what this method does, let's just document it. So this method performs cleanup functions for the scene. That's what it does. Okay? Cleans up the scene. But now that we've done this, guess what? We have errors everywhere in all the other scenes because start, play, and end, they implement my scene superclass. We need to fix those now. So let's go to start. And if I hover over it, you can see what it does. It says, hey, non-abstract class start does not implement inherited abstract member clean. How can I fix this? Well, I need to make a clean method. That's how I can fix it. So let's do that here. So public clean. This is inside of my start. And in my start, all I want to do is this dot remove all children, right? So I want to remove all children from my scene. That's what I've done before, right? And that's a typical clean method. It's pretty simple. It's like one command. However, inside my play, it's not like that. Inside my play scene, instead of just doing remove all children, which I'm going to do, again, this is inside the play scene, right? I also want to call upon my plane, this dot plane dot, remember we shared my engine sound dot stop. I can turn off the engine sound now here first in my clean method. Stop the engine, then remove everything. By the way, if you remove everything first, then stop the engine, not going to work. Please don't do that. That'd be bad, okay? So that is stopping the plane sound. Okay, let's fix my end scene now. My end scene, same as before, as my start scene. I need to remove all children, right? We want to take all the children away from my end scene. So this is good, right? So all I've done is add another helper function or lifecycle function called clean. And if I call the clean method now from my game.ts, so instead of doing this current scene dot remove all children, I just have to call current scene dot clean, and that'll take care of everything for me. So depending on the scene, it'll clean up differently, which is what we want. Because your scenes might be more complex. You might have multiple sounds in the background, a music soundtrack, and something else going on. And you want to clean all that stuff up so it doesn't leak from one scene to the other. Okay, so that's kind of the clean thing we did. So we have to modify our scene abstract superclass to do that. So again, we've made a lot of changes. So I'm going to go here and add those in. I'm going to say updated, or I'll say added clean lifecycle function to scene class, which is what I did, right? And add that in, and then I'm going to push. So that's that part. You can see I'm making many commits today to show you like how I would normally work, to keep track of all this stuff. So if something goes wrong, I can always step back, right? This is the idea behind this. Okay, cool. So we've cleaned everything such as stop the sound, but we're still not fixing the end scene. The end scene is still going to have the same problem. If I go to the end, it says end scene, first of all. It should say game over. And if I go back, I only have 0 life. If I go back, I have -1 life. And if I go back, I have -2 life. So that's not a fix for this. I want to fix this one too. So this is going to be done in the end scene. Let's go to the end scene here. And what happens is this. When I click the back button, not only do I want to go back to play, but I want to reset some stuff. I want to say a couple things here. I want to say that my config.game, right, lives, I want to set that back to 5. And I want to say my config.game.score, well, I want to set that back to 0, right? Because, hey, you failed. Now you have to start over, let's say. All right, so that, and again, you don't have to do this. You can keep the old score. There's a lot of things you can do here if you have multiple levels or a different way of doing things. Here, I just want to redo this part, okay? Let's see if that works. So again, oh yeah, and might as well change this stuff. So instead of it saying end scene, let's say game over. So game over, right? Game over scene, which makes more sense. Let's try this again and start. So I get some score, and I die. It says game over. If I go back, we're good to go. It starts back at 5 again. I can play again. All right? But wouldn't it be nice if this had 2 major changes? One, for the end scene, it would be nice if I had, instead of a back button, it would have a restart button. And then somehow my high score is displayed down here. That would be nice if I could do that. Okay, well, let's make that happen. So far, let's change the back button first. That's the easiest change to make. So again, if I look at my, here's my app. No, not this one. Here is my app 10C. You can see that's inside of here. I have an assets folder and I have an images folder. Inside the images folder, I have a start button. I want to make a restart button. You can use any graphic manipulation program you want, but we need a new asset here. So I'm going to double click on my start button, which is going to launch, in my case, fireworks. So you can launch whatever you want. And what I want to do is I want to scroll in and change this from start to restart. Pretty simple. It's going to say something different though. And again, this is an example of, I'm not using a label, I'm actually using an image to modify my button. I'm going to save this, file, save as. We'll call this the restart button. Restart. We don't need this anymore. And now that I have this restart button, I need to preload it. So I'm going to go back to my game. Here's my game. And up in the top where I start preloading all my images, well, I don't need the back button anymore. Let's call this the restart button. So restart. And we'll load restart. We have the back button there just in case we want to use it again, but we just don't need it. This is pretty good. Okay, but now that we use the restart button here, let's change our end scene so it uses the restart button, not the back button. So there's restart. It says game over. We're pretty good, except it says back button, and you know, for an end label, I want it. This should see the game over label if I want to be for correctness, game over label and restart button. Let's change that up here. So I'm going to rename these. So this will be rename symbol, game over label. There's that one, and let's change this to, well, we'll rename this one to restart button. There we go. And now we have everything that looks pretty good on this side so far. Again, for what it's supposed to look like. Okay. Let's try this out now, and we're going to go back to this and start it up again. Again, we can see that we can play. And when we die, it says game over and restart. These are good things. These are good things. We're good. All right. So we can update GitHub now. So again, going back to GitHub, we can say that we changed back button to with restart button. When we exchanged back button and end scene. It's a pretty long comment, and you can see that I'm going to get a warning that it doesn't like too long. Right? I'm going to add this to the staging area here, and I'm going to click on this commit button and push. It's going to push this up to GitHub now. Good. But what I really want now is to add a game over label. Well, this is the work of our new scoreboard, right? We have our scoreboard. We already made one. We can just add it in here. Let's do it. So again, at the top, we have our lives label and score label. And we also have lives and score. Let's add everything we need for high score. So again, prop, right? We want to make something called high score, which is going to be a number. And high score is also going to be accessed with caps because that's our convention for this class. So we're going to do this, high score, yes. We're going to move this one up. We're going to use the Alt button to do that, right? And we're going to move all this stuff down where we need to put it. I'm going to cut this one out this time. And I'm going to go in between lives label and score. I'm going to put high score. There we go. There's high score. Nice, nice. Let's also make our a property for my high score label. So again, high score label, which is of type objects.label. Right? And again, we'll move this one up, this one right here, move this one up with our Alt button, high score label. We don't need a setter like we've talked about before because it's because it's an object and we just have to get a reference to the object with a getter, but no setter required. Right? So this is cool. I like this. So move this down to the underneath the score label just for, again, completeness. Looks the same. And we need to do the same thing we did with our lives and score. We're going to use the setter of our high score to do the same thing we've done here. But we don't have right now a config game high score. We need to add that in. Let's add that in now. I'm going to go to definition for this. Go to definition. And I'm going to add in a high score. So public static high score, which is going to be a number. We're going to set the initial value to 0 because there is no high score at the beginning. Right, that's what this is going to be. And I want to do the same thing here with high score. So when I set high score, I want to say that my config.game.high score, well, that's equal to this .underscore high score. Yeah. And I also want to update my label. This high score label. Now this is where it's tricky. I want to use set text here, and I'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to set text with a new string. It's going to be high score, right? Plus this underscore high score. I want to add that in, but I'm using the set text method. And what set text does of my label, if you notice, go to definition, it actually measures the width and the height. Because I'm going to make my high score centered on the screen, not like how the other labels are. It's going to be a centered label, right? So that's why I want to use set text in this case, which I've done to provision for this thing. Okay? So that's what this does. High score does that. We're not done. We also have to instantiate it. This underscore high score label is equal to a new objects.label. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, I don't need a high score label every time. Why are we instantiating it? That's okay. Yes, we could probably make a change, right? Where you can say, well, it only exists when I need it, when the scene is of this type and so on. I'm not going to do that here. So this is going to be pretty big. I'll still make it, I'm not sure if 20 pixels is the right size. Let's make it 40 pixels. Again, I'm just guessing the size, and console us again for now. And then from a font color, again, we're going to go FF00, and then the X and Y position, I want to make it center, so it's 320 on the X-axis. And then on the Y-axis, 240 is going to be probably too close to the label. Let's make it something like 290. Okay, so 290, undo, 290, so to kind of instantiate this thing. I also want to say that this high score is equal to config.game.high score, right? So that we just do all the same things we normally do. This is all the same that we've done before. Now here's the trick. I don't need to use high score every single time, and I'm not going to add high score to my play scene. I'm only going to add high score to my end scene, but not lives or score. I don't need to have those things in there, just high score. So how does this work? Going back to my end scene then, I'm going to instantiate a new object of type scoreboard. So private underscore scoreboard is equal to a new managers.scoreboard. That's that. And then in my start scene, I'm going to instantiate it. I'm going to say that this underscore scoreboard is equal to a new managers.scoreboard, which instantiates the new thing. That makes it, right? And what I also want to do here is I want to assign a value. I want to say that this scoreboard.high score, this one, well, that's equal to config.game.high score, right? I want to do that here because once I do that here, it'll trigger the high score being centered with the right value. Okay, whatever that is. And then I want to add it to the scene just like we've done before at the end. So I'm going to say that this dot add child, this dot underscore scoreboard dot high score label. Notice I'm not adding the other two labels. I have two more labels I could add, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just adding the stuff I need from the Scoreboard Manager. Again, a little bit more of a memory overlay, but it's okay. I mean, it's very minor compared to what we're doing. We're actually not adding additional overhead because it's going to be cleaned up after this thing gets deleted anyway. Okay, so that should work with my my game over scene, right? My game over scene now is going to have a high score that appears in the middle of the scene. Let's see if this works. All right, so we're going to go back to this. Actually, one thing we should do is definitely, I like to save all because, and maybe close off all this extra stuff just to make it easier for us to handle. So we can see everything here. And I can also see if anything has changed. Inside script, you can see the areas that I've got changes to, managers and scenes and config. These are all the three things I've changed this time around. All right, let's see if this works. I'm going to go back to, I don't need this anymore. Let's close this off. Let's see if it works. So start. All right, and yeah, I want to get a score of 200 and die. Oh man, what the heck? It says high score 0. What happened? Well, we have no mechanism for showing this. This is the right location. I think this is the right place. But one of the challenges doesn't show any score at all. Why? Because in the collision manager, we never did anything with it. We never said, hey, by the way, if you get a high score, it becomes a high score. We never said that. So we have to do it here. So inside the collision response function, I'm going to say that, make another if statement. If, and I can say that if config.game.highscore, or sorry, score is greater than config.game.highscore. So if it's greater than the high score, the current high score, then I can say that the config.game.highscore is equal to the config.game.score, which is basically saying, hey, if it's greater, then swap. One thing I also don't like when we do this kind of stuff, these switch case, is that they're kind of in the same switch here. This switch itself, it holds all of this together, right? Let yay sound. Yay sound is actually available down here too. That's the way JavaScript works. So to limit that, and this is just an aside, you can add curly braces, empty curly braces like this, that you can kind of take all of this and put that inside here, right? You can do that. And same thing with this. It creates an auxiliary scope, right? So that's what it does. That kind of allows us to encapsulate some of those changes inside of here a little better. Okay, there we go. So that's this scope and that's this scope. Again, doesn't make any changes in terms of the way functionality works, but this way they're separate scopes. Okay, cool. So this island in cloud, and I've updated it so that if it's the high score, it's now the high score. Let's check this out and see if it works. Start. 100 points. And we die. Okay, high score is 200. Let's restart and get a higher score. If we can. It's not going to be greedy. If you become greedy in this game, you're going to fail. Right? And I've played this game in different forms a couple of times, so I know I can probably get 1,000, maybe. Unless I'm careless. Okay. Let's say that's good enough. You can see that my high score is now 1100. So that gives me my high score. And I've got almost everything I need for this game. Almost. Okay. This is a great place to stop and take a break, guys. I'm going to put this up on GitHub first. So going back to this, what did I change? I have, again, what I did was I added a high score to the end scene, really, at the end of the day. Right? Now, I could have made more commits here, but, you know, I did a few. So again, I said added high score to end scene. Kind of encapsulates all those little changes I made. So again, click on this and then push. And that should be pretty good at this point. All right, any questions around this? I'm going to check and see if there's any problems. I'm looking at my my log here. Any questions, guys? Are you guys good? Just gonna check and see. No questions. You're all good to go. Excellent. Let's take a short break, guys. We're sitting at 3 p.m. right now. Let's take a break and for about 15 minutes. We'll come back at 3:15. We'll do a few more things for Mail Pilot, and then we'll be done for today. All right. I don't expect to do too much more. I'm going to start talking about animation a little bit today and how to put together a sprite sheet and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to need to do that. And then we'll finish off with just a reminder of what's due next week. Okay. Well, let's take a short break, 15 minutes, and we'll be right back. I'm going to stop recording, and I'm just going to pause my my session here. So I'll pause first.
You are now muted.